In evolutionary terms, a man who has a short-term liaison is betting that his illegitimate child will survive without his help, or is counting on a cuckolded husband to bring it up as his own. For the man who can afford it, a surer way to maximize progeny is to seek several wives and invest in all their children. Men should want many wives, not just many sex partners. And, in fact, men in power have allowed polygamy in more than 80% of human cultures. Jews practiced it until Christian times and outlawed it only in the 10th century. Mormons encouraged it until it was outlawed by the United States government in the late 19th century, and even today there are thought to be tens of thousands of clandestine polygamous marriages in Utah and other western states as well. Whenever polygamy is allowed, men seek additional wives and the means to attract them. Wealthy and prestigious men have more than one wife. Never-do-wells have none. Of course, typically a man who has been married for some time seeks a younger wife. The senior wife remains his confidant and partner and runs the household. The junior one becomes his sexual interest. In foraging societies, wealth cannot accumulate, but a few fierce men, skilled leaders, and good hunters may have 2 to 10 wives. With the invention of agriculture and massive inequality, polygamy can reach ridiculous proportions. Laura Betzig has documented that in civilization after civilization, despotic men have implemented the ultimate male fantasy, a harem of hundreds of women closely guarded, often by eunuchs, so that no other man can touch them. Similar arrangements have popped up in India, China, the Islamic world, sub-Saharan Africa, and the Americas. King Solomon, according to the biblical text, had 1,000 concubines. Roman imperators called them slaves, and medieval European kings called them serving maids. Polyandry, by comparison, is vanishing rare. Men occasionally share a wife in environments so harsh that a man cannot survive without a woman, but the arrangement collapses when conditions improve, however. Eskimos, or the Inuit peoples, have sporadically had polyandrous marriages, but the co-husbands are always jealous, and one often murders the other. As always, kinship mitigates enmity, and among Tibetan farmers, for example, 2 or more brothers sometimes marry a woman simultaneously in the hope of putting together a family that can survive in the bleak territory. The junior brother, though, aspires to have a wife of his own. Marriage arrangements are usually described from the man's point of view, not because the desires of women are irrelevant, but because powerful men have usually gotten their way in things throughout human history. Of course, men are bigger and stronger because they have been selected to fight one another, and they can form powerful clans because in traditional societies, sons stay near their families and daughters move away. The most florid polygamists are always despots, who are men who could kill without fear of retribution. According to the Guinness Book of World Records, the man with the most recorded children in history, human history, 888 children, was an imperator of Morocco with the evocative name Moulay Ismail the Bloodthirsty. The hyperpolygamist not only must fend off the hundreds of men that he has deprived of wives, but must oppress his harem. Marriages always have at least a bit of reciprocity, and in most polygamous societies, a man may forego additional wives because of their emotional and financial demands. A despot can keep them imprisoned and also terrified. But oddly enough, in a freer society, polygamy is not necessarily bad for women. On financial and ultimately on evolutionary grounds, a woman may prefer to share a wealthy husband than have the undivided attention of a pauper, and may even prefer it on an emotional grounds. Laura Betzig summed up the reason. Would you rather be the 3rd wife of JFK or the 1st wife of Bozo the Clown? Co-wives often get along, sharing expertise in child care duties, though jealousies among the subfamilies often erupt, much as in step-families, but with more factions and adult players. If marriage were genuinely a free market, then in a polygamous society, men's greater demand for a limited supply of partners and their inflexible sexual jealousy would give the advantage to women. Laws enforcing monogamy would work to women's disadvantage. The economist Stephen Landsberg explains the market principle using labor instead of money in his example. Quote, today when my wife and I argue about who should do the dishes, we start from positions of roughly equal strength. If polygamy were legal, my wife would hint that she's thought about leaving me to marry Alan and Cindy down the block, and I might end up with dishpan hands. Anti-polygamy laws are a textbook example of the theory of cartels. Producers, initially competitive, gathered together in a conspiracy against the public, or more specifically, against their customers. They agree that each firm will restrict its output in an attempt to keep prices high, but a high price invites cheating in the sense that each firm seeks to expand its own output beyond what it is allowable under the agreement. Eventually, the cartel crumbles unless it is enforced by legal sanctions, and even then, violations are legion. That story, told in every economics textbook, is also the story of male producers in the romance industry. Initially fiercely competitive, they gather together in a conspiracy against their customers, the women to whom they offer their hands in marriage. The conspiracy consists of an agreement under which each man restricts his romantic endeavors in an attempt to increase the bargaining position of men in general. But the improved position of men invites cheating, in the sense that each man tries to court more women than allowed under the agreement. The cartel survives only because it is enforced by legal sanctions, and even so, violations are legion. End quote. Legal monogamy historically has been an agreement between more and less powerful men, not between men and women. Its aim is not so much to exploit the customers in the romance industry, that of women, as to minimize the cost of competition among the producers, that of men. Under polygamy, men vie for extraordinary Darwinian stakes, many wives versus none, and the competition is literally cutthroat. Many homicides and most tribal wars are directly or indirectly about competition for women. Leaders have outlawed polygamy when they needed less powerful men as allies and when they needed their subjects to fight an enemy instead of fighting one another. Early Christianity appealed to poor men partly because the promise of monogamy kept them in the marriage game. And in societies, since egalitarianism and monogamy go together as naturally as despotism and polygamy. Even today, inequality has allowed a kind of polygamy to flourish. Wealthy men support a wife and a mistress, or divorce their wives at 20-year intervals and pay them alimony and child support while marrying another woman. The journalist Robert Wright has speculated that easy divorce and remarriage, like overt polygamy, increases violence. Women of childbearing age are monopolized by well-to-do men, and the shortage of potential wives trickles down to the lower strata, forcing the poorest young men into desperate competition. Of course, all of these intrigues come from a single difference between the sexes: men's greater desire for multiple partners. But men are not completely indiscriminate, and women are not voiceless in any but the most despotic societies. Each sex, male and female, has criteria for picking partners, for liaisons, and for marriages. Like other staunch human tastes, they appear to be adaptations. Both the sexes, both female and male, want spouses, and men want liaisons more than women do, but that does not mean that women never want liaisons. If they never did want them, the male urge to philander could not have evolved because it would never have been rewarded, unless the philanderer would always trick his conquest into thinking he was courting her as a wife. But even then, a married woman should never philander or be a target of philandering. Men's testicles would not have evolved to their larger than gorilla proportions, for their sperm would never be in danger of being outnumbered. And the jealous feelings directed at wives would not exist. As we shall see, they do exist. The ethnographic record shows that in all societies, both sexes commit adultery, and the women do not always take arsenic or throw themselves under the 502 from St. Petersburg. What could ancestral women have gained from liaisons that would have allowed the desire to evolve? One reward is resources. If men want sex for its own sake, women can make them pay for it. In foraging societies, women openly demand gifts from their lovers, usually meat. You may be offended at the thought that our foremothers gave themselves away for a steak dinner, but to foraging peoples in lean times when high-quality protein is extremely scarce, meat is an obsession. From a distance, it sounds like prostitution, but to the people involved, it may feel more like ordinary etiquette. Such as a woman in our own society might be offended if a wealthier lover never took her out to dinner or spent money on her, though both parties would deny there is a quid pro quo. In questionnaire questionnaires of female college students report that an extravagant lifestyle and a willingness to give gifts are important qualities in picking a short-term lover, though not in picking a husband. And like many birds, a woman could seek genes from the best quality male and investment from her husband because they are unlikely to be men on status, ambition, and industriousness. And in most, they value dependability and stability more than men do. In every country, men place a higher value on youth and on looks than women do. On average, men want a bride 2.66 years younger. Women want a groom 3.42 years older. The results have been replicated many times. People's actions tell the same story. According to the contents of personal advertisements, men seeking women seek youth and looks. Women seeking men seek financial security, height, and sincerity. The owner of one dating service observed women really read over our profile forms. Guys just look at the pictures. Among married couples, the husband is 2.99 years older than the wife, as if they had a split the difference between their preferences. In foraging cultures, however, everyone agrees that some people are sexier than others, and the sex pots are usually young women and prestigious men. An obvious retort is that women value wealthy and powerful men because it is the men who have the wealth and power. In a sexist society, women have to marry up to get them. That alternative has been tested and refuted, however. Women with large salaries, postgraduate degrees, prestigious professions, and high sense of self place a greater value on wealth and status in a husband than other women do. So, do the leaders of feminist organizations as well. Poor men place no higher value on wealth or earning power in a wife than other men do. Among the Bakweri people in Cameroon, the women are wealthier and more powerful than the men, and they still insist on men with money.